ancient market town of Houghton-le-Spring nestles under a limestone outcrop to the northeast of Durham City. This picturesque town grew from a Saxon village to a small agricultural settlement through the Victorian industrial expansion, which brought prosperity to the area, into a large industrial and administrative centre. It has, with the post-war decline and the subsequent redevelopment in the 1960s, become the pleasant suburban community we know today, which abounds with many historical links, still preserved for us to discover. The marketplace is believed to be the site of the original Saxon settlement, with the farmsteads and cottages gathered around the green through which a freshwater stream flowed, now known as Houghton Burn. This photograph, taken in 1912, showed things had changed very little until the 1950s, when it was completely redeveloped, although it still retains much of its original layout. Incidentally, Houghton Burn still flows, although it has been roofed over for many years. At the centre of the town is the parish church of St. Michael and All Angels. It's possible that a church has stood on this site since Saxon times. However, most of this structure dates from the 13th and 14th centuries. The pitched roof and tower, erected between 1836 and 1858, replaced an earlier lead-covered steeple. One of the most impressive features of Houghton Parish Church is the great 14th century west window, where modern stained glass depicts scenes of the life and works of Rector Bernard Gilpin. It was dedicated in 1984 to commemorate the 400th anniversary of the death of Bernard Gilpin. The ancient rectory of Houghton-le-Spring dates from 1483. It was taken over by the Houghton Urban District Council in 1949, when parts of the large rambling building were demolished and the remainder converted into council offices. At the same time, the grounds were landscaped and transformed into the beautiful public park that now gives much pleasure to the general public. Rector Bernard Gilpin, known as the Father of the Poor and the Apostle of the North. He devoted his life to the care of the people of his extensive parish, who, rich or poor, were always welcome at the rectory. One of the many tales told of Bernard Gilpin is that during one of his many journeys he visited Glastonbury Abbey in Somerset. During that visit he took a cutting of the famous holy thorn, which still flourishes today in the grounds of the abbey. According to legend, it is this thorn that sprang from the staff of Joseph of Arimathea, the man who allowed the body of Jesus to be interred in his own tomb. Gilpin planted his cutting in his garden at the rectory grounds at Houghton, now the rectory park, opposite the church of St. Michael's. The thorn flourished for hundreds of years. In recent years, gnarled and decayed, it withered away, but strangely, it's now flourishing into a healthy bush. Standing to the east of the parish church of St. Michael's, the Keepier Grammar School was founded and partly endowed in 1574 by Rector Bernard Gilpin. The name is derived from John Heath, a friend of Gilpin, who generously supported the founding of the school from the property of the dissolved St. Giles Hospital at Keepier, near Durham City. The school continued in use until 1922. Today, known as Keepier Hall, it serves as a parish hall and is the headquarters for local groups and societies. At the top of Church Street stands the imposing Elizabethan mansion known as Houghton Hall, built by the rector Robert Hutton around 1600. It is said that a dispute arose between Rector Hutton and his grandson, also called Robert, a noted Puritan captain, because the Roundhead captain wished for his favourite horse and dog to be buried in the churchyard, near to his ultimate resting place. The rector, of course, could not agree to this, so the horse was buried in the grounds of Houghton Hall, and the captain left instructions that he should be buried next to his horse. There seems to be little truth in this story, since Rector Hutton died in 1623, when his grandson was only a small boy. However, Captain Hutton's tomb was sited in the hall grounds until the 1950s, when, during redevelopment, the tombstone was taken to the churchyard and set in front of the 17th century almshouses. It bears an inscription in Latin, which may be translated, "Here lies Robert Hutton, Esquire, who died 9th day of August, 1680, and by dying lives." In the mid-19th century, the hall was the residence of Sir George Eliot, MP, entrepreneur and industrialist, who was responsible for, among other things, the laying of the first transatlantic telephone cable. For many years, the hall was the home of the Houghton Social Club and is now the headquarters of the Houghton YMCA. The parish of Houghton-le-Spring was very large, with some 18 villages and townships contained within the boundary, extending from Bishop Wearmouth parish southwards towards Rainton Gate and from Warden Law westward to Houghton Gate. Until the early 19th century, these small rural communities relied on agriculture as their main enterprise. However, under this pastoral landscape lay rich coal deposits. It was the exploitation of this valuable natural resource during the Victorian industrial expansion that led to the growth and prosperity of Houghton and district. Coal had been mined at Biddick, Finkel and Lumley as early as the 14th century. By the early 1700s, coal from various mines was being transported overland by horse-drawn wagons along primitive wooden wagonways. It was from New Penshaw, high above the River Wear, that loaded wagons ran down long inclines to the riverside staiths at South Biddick, where the coal was loaded onto keelboats, then navigated downstream to the port of Sunderland, and awaiting sailing ships bound for London and the continent. Some of these wagonways still exist as public footpaths and roads, while evidence of others can still be seen. This grassy embankment just off the Burnmoor Road at Hindeson's Crescent, Shiny Row, was once part of the Vane Tempest wagonway. This road, perhaps given away by its straightness, running from Penshaw Station Bridge down to Fatfield Bridge, was formerly the route of the Vane Tempest wagonway. This embankment, that until recently lay in the field to the west of Penshaw Bank, was also a wagonway. Unfortunately, historical sites are also prime building land and are sometimes in the way of redevelopment. This farm lane that runs from the Coxgreen Road at New Penshaw down to the riverside of the Victoria Bridge was once the route of the Lambton wagonway. In the first half of the 19th century, the demand for coal began to increase rapidly to feed the hungry furnaces of the Industrial Revolution. The sinking of Houghton Colliery was completed in 1827. By the 1920s, the colliery, originally owned by the Earls of Durham, was in its heyday, producing 10,000 tons of coal per week, with a labour force of over 2,000 men and boys. Sadly, it closed in 1981, after 154 years, ending the long tradition of Houghton as a mining town. Apart from numerous collieries in the area, other industries were established in the district, including Lambton Engine Works and Railway. This was an extensive private rail system linking the collieries with the coal staiths at Sunderland, maintaining a fleet of over 50 steam locomotives in its prime. Later it became part of the National Coal Board, now British Coal, with its headquarters in Philadelphia. New Lambton had been the site of a cokeworks and brickworks for many years, as this view of about 1905 shows. These old works had been replaced by the NCB in the 1960s, until this too was phased out by British Coal in 1986. The site is now completely demolished. An electric power generating station was built at Philadelphia about 1907 by the Durham Collieries Power Company to supply power to the local collieries and associated works, and also to the many colliery houses in the area, a rare luxury in those days, and it became part of the North Eastern Electricity Supply Company Limited until it closed in the 1930s. Although Houghton-le-Spring was until recently regarded as a coal mining town, its origin was a small rural market town, and as this photograph taken in 1918 at Glebe Terrace shows, farming was still carried out almost to the heart of the town, until the industrial expansion of the 1930s necessitated large urban developments. This picture, taken in 1902, shows New Bottle Street, looking north towards the colliery, which is just visible in the background. It's interesting that New Bottle Street, now a busy main shopping area, had until 1908 no buildings on the west side of the street. By 1927, it had become the main commercial centre, serving the surrounding colliery villages. On the left of this picture is the Colosseum Cinema. In the centre is the old Gaiety Theatre, later rebuilt as the Grand Cinema. Next to that can be seen the dome of the Empire Theatre. Today the street retains much of its original layout and character, although the Empire is now a bingo hall, the two other theatres are supermarkets, and there is now a one-way traffic system in operation. The founder of the firm of W. Greenhow came to Houghton-le-Spring in 1805 to establish a china retail business in close proximity to the potteries at Sunderland and Newbottle. The potteries are now closed, but Greenhouse is still supplying the people of Houghton with glassware, china and hardware from the same premises in Newbottle Street. Church Street runs east along the south side of St. Michael's and retains all of its original charm, despite having been cut in two to make way for the A690 dual carriageway in the late 1960s. The raised footpath is known locally as the Quay, and in the background is a 17th century manor house known as Houghton Hall. Until the 1960s road traffic development, Sunderland Street, as this view of about 1912 shows, was a busy shopping area, as well as the main route between Durham and Sunderland. Today, with most of the buildings demolished, this street remains as a hardly recognisable quiet cul-de-sac. Houghton Cut, now the main road from Durham to Sunderland, is believed to have been started by prisoners from the Napoleonic War of 1815, but it is more likely that it was started by unemployed soldiers returning from the same war, and has been deepened and widened on several occasions since that time. Neesham Place, named after the wealthy 18th century landowner and coal baron John Neesham, whose residence, Neesham Hall, once stood at the top of the bank, locally known as Quality Hill, because of the fine houses belonging to the more affluent residents of Houghton. By the 1920s, the area had deteriorated, and the houses had been used as tenements. However, the area has been partly redeveloped, and the Georgian properties restored, and it is now a conservation area. In 1854, the local Board of Health was formed, and in 1894, the Houghton Urban District Council was created, making Houghton-le-Spring the established administrative centre for the surrounding mining communities, as well as providing shops, business premises and recreation of all kinds. Alongside the churches, chapels, schools, halls and theatres, Houghton Town had over 30 public houses and beer shops. Not all bars served alcohol, however, as this picture from 1912 shows. The Gaiety Temperance Bar was and still is run by the Rayani family from their Newbottle Street premises opposite the old Empire and Gaiety theatres. Clubs and societies abounded in Houghton district. Cycling clubs were a very popular pastime. This group of cyclists in 1890 would most likely go on long trips to the country or to the seaside at weekends and bank holidays. By the 1920s, charabancs, such as this one seen setting out from the Robbie Burns public house, had become popular for organised family outings to the countryside and to seaside resorts, such as Seaham Harbour and Roker. It seems not all things change, though the coaches may travel much further to seaside resorts these days. Brass bands were very popular and always in great demand for parades and open-air concerts, not forgetting the annual Durham Big Meeting. This is Houghton Colliery Band, posing outside the Queen's Head public house, better known as the Pillars, in Sunderland Street in 1900. Houghton also boasted several successful football teams. Houghton Colliery Swifts was one of them. In 1920, when this photograph was taken, they were the winners of the North East Durham League and former winners of the Merton Aged Miners' Cup. Earlier this century, the game of handball had been popular in some parts. The game was played on a specially constructed ball alley. Here we see the New Herrington handball players in about 1912. Sunnyside consisted of 3 long rows of colliery houses and a Methodist chapel. The chapel was the centre of the religious and social life in this small community, supporting amongst other activities its own football team, brass band and choir. This photograph of the 1920s shows the choir outside Sunnyside Farm. Any history of Houghton would not be complete without mentioning the annual festival of Houghton Feast, which has been celebrated every October for over 800 years. Originally, it was the festival of the dedication of the Church of St. Michael and All Angels, and has developed into a large fair embracing the whole of the town. This photograph, taken in 1895, shows the Lake Fairground, still remembered with nostalgia by many, although few actually know the origin of the name Lake. In the 1880s, the owner of the land, a Mr. Colson, decided to dam the nearby Houghton Burn and create a boating lake. However, the mill owners downstream were deprived of their water power, and after litigation, the lake was filled in to form a fairground, and has been known as the lake ever since. The lake was situated behind Sunderland Street, but during the 1960s was redeveloped to make way for the A690 road system and the now disused bus station. One of the most popular features during Houghton Feast is the roasting of the ox. Shortly after Bernard Gilpin came to Houghton, he was summoned to London by Queen Mary to stand trial for alleged heresy, which meant certain execution. It is said, while on the journey, travelling on horseback, his horse stumbled and Gilpin broke his leg. During his convalescence, Queen Mary died, to be succeeded by Queen Elizabeth I, so Gilpin was released. And upon his return, an ox was roasted in celebration. And every year after that, Gilpin had an ox roasted for the poor of the parish. It has also been stated that this was the origin of Houghton Feast, but it is known that the feast was celebrated centuries before Gilpin's time. By the 20th century, this tradition of roasting an ox had died out, and it was not until the 1960s that the ox roasting was revived by the Houghton Rotary Club. This very interesting view of New Bottle Village, which greets the traveller from Houghton, shows on the left the Havelock Arms, now a general dealer's, the Jolly Potters, and the Social Club. Things have hardly changed in this picturesque village since this photograph was taken in 1910. The large Georgian building in the centre, now demolished, was the William IV Inn. In 1905, the Sunderland District Tramway Company started the operation of an electric tram system that linked the Houghton area with Sunderland. By 1925, the trams had been replaced with motor buses, and a new company, the Sunderland District Omnibus Company Limited, the SDO, was formed, who operated the familiar blue buses for many years. Frozen in time. In 1906, this tram car of the Sunderland District Tramway was en route from Sunderland to Harrington Burn, shown passing the Church of St Aidan's at New Harrington. This church was erected in 1886 and is still in regular use, serving this attractive suburban village. Harrington Burn in about 1920. The tram is ready to depart for Penshaw Station. On the left is the old YMCA building. This view, taken in 1908 from the road bridge, shows the burn, or stream, that gives Harrington Burn its name. The water from this burn was used as a power source for Harrington Corn Mill and Penshaw Foundry. The public house in the background, the Rose and Crown, is now called the Horse and Hounds. A rare photograph of Shiny Row in 1905. These cottages were known as the Long Row and dated from about 1825. Today, the site is occupied by Grangewood Close. Shiny Row has changed out of all recognition since this photograph was taken in 1920. Today, a modern road system passes through the village. Westbourne Terrace on the right is mostly shops, but the gateway, once leading to Taylor's Farm, still exists. The village of Old Penshaw, situated next to the busy A183 trunk road, but giving the impression that it is totally isolated from the outside world. The remnant of the village green is surrounded by charming houses, the parish church and rectory, and 2 attractive inns. A Wesleyan chapel once stood at the side of the green and was built in 1778 at the place where John Wesley, the founder of Methodism, preached in 1751. To the northeast of the village, at the top of the steep slopes of Penshaw Hill, stands perhaps the most famous stone edifice in the north of England, Penshaw Monument, or to give it its correct title, the Earl of Durham's Monument. It was built by public subscription in 1844 to honour the memory of John George Lambton, 1st Earl of Durham, statesman and 1st Governor-General of Canada, who died in 1840. It's based on the Temple of Theseus in Athens, although the Penshaw columns measure double the diameter. It's a prominent landmark, now floodlit, and can be seen from many miles distant. Several stories are told locally about the monument. The best known relates to that when the noble Lord Lambton returned from Canada, he was shown the newly built structure, and his agent asked him what he thought of it. His lordship replied, If my tenants and farmers can afford to build this useless structure, then they can afford to pay me more rent." He then promptly raised the rents of all his lands, farms and cottages. Another story claims the monument is unfinished and should have had a roof or even a statue on top. One farmer is quoted as saying, "The Earl raised our rents, so we will not raise a roof." These stories are of course untrue, since the Earl died in 1840 and the monument was not erected until 1844. At Fence Houses was situated the nearest railway station to the town of Houghton-le-Spring, with regular passenger, goods and mail services. Here we see the railway station looking along Cooperative Terrace in about 1905. The station was opened in 1840 and was until 1872 on the main York to Newcastle line. It was closed in 1964, although the signal box and level crossing remain and are still used for freight traffic and as a relief line for the York to Newcastle route. The eastern part of Lumley Park Dean, better known as Brecon Hill Dean, was a favourite place for woodland walks. This photograph, taken near Floater's Mill Bridge in 1905, shows some small boys playing in the water, while a group of older children look on. The hamlet of Houghton Gate, shown here in 1905 with the Bournemore Road in the foreground and the road to the right leading to Houghton-le Street. In the days of the horse-drawn stagecoaches, this was a toll gate, one of several in the Houghton area. It is still an isolated hamlet, with this short row of renovated cottages still surviving. Rightly so, Houghton district is proud of its historic past, but it is far from a moribund and depressed area with no future. The old industries are now in decline, but with the A1M motorway giving easy access to the rest of the country, combined with quiet and quaint historic villages in this one of the most gentle and beautiful of counties, makes Houghton district not only a place to visit, but a place in which to stay. This is borne out by the numerous new businesses and enterprises now firmly established in the community, giving Houghton not only a proud past, but a prosperous and a vibrant future.